Now folks, what if I told you that £261,000 might not be enough to retire at 57? Would that surprise you? What if I told you that it could be enough with the right plan? Let's meet Carla. She's 52, she's pretty financially savvy, and she came to us with a question we hear time and time again. Can I retire at X with Y in my pension? So for Carla, it was 57 and she had £261,000 at the time of seeking advice, and she wanted to know if it was going to be enough to make early retirement a reality for her. Now, if you've ever wondered the same thing, or you've assumed you need way more than that to step away from work, this is exactly the kind of case that will challenge your thinking. Because when it comes to retirement, it's not just about how much you've saved, it's about what you do with it. Now, as always, if you're thinking, I need to get serious about this, or you're wondering, is early retirement even possible for me? Well, we're here to help. Our free retirement review is designed to answer those questions and a lot more. And there's no fee and there's no obligation, just clear, tailored advice based on your situation. So when you're ready, if you're ready, click the link in the description and book your free session. But for now, let's dive into our client story for today. Now, when Carla booked in with Rees for a complimentary financial review, as I've said, she was 52 years old and she had a big question on her mind. Could she realistically retire at 57? Now, at that point, she was self-employed, she was running her own florists, and she earned about £30,000 a year net after her costs. But her journey to this point was a little bit different to that. Before opening the shop, she had been a successful business development manager, and throughout her corporate career, she was diligent about contributing to her workplace pensions. However, after years in the corporate world, Carla felt a bit fed up. She was burnt out and she was actually disconnected from what really did matter to her. So she decided to follow a long-standing dream and opened her own florist at age 40. Now, it was her way of bringing passion and purpose into her daily life, and I'm sure many of you have felt the same way. Now, Carla had been really consistent in terms of pension contributions previously to becoming a florist, and she was putting in 8% of her salary for most of that. That would typically be 5% from her own pay, 3% from her employers. Now, she had 3 old workplace pensions totaling £115,000, and she's got a current pension pot of £32,000. Now, on top of that, she'd saved £14,000 in a cash ISA. Then, unfortunately, life took a bit of a bittersweet turn because she inherited £100,000 after her remaining parent passed away. Now, this inheritance bumped her total accessible retirement savings at age 52 to £261,000, and she estimated that to live comfortably from age 57 she'd probably need about £2,750 a month. Now, we had a nice long chat about spending habits and how they might change in later life, so she agreed that after 75 she'd probably be fine to look at £2,000 a month. She was also set to receive the full state pension at 67, and that was close to 12k a year. To help Carla figure out if retiring at 57 was actually doable, we based our calculations on a 2% inflation rate, which is in line with the government's long-term target, and a 3% investment return based on a cautious risk level, and that matched Carla's attitude to risk and FCA guidelines. Now, we deliberately chose these figures as a conservative estimate. We often get comments pushing back on assumptions like these, quoting 10% annual returns, but just to be clear, we know perfectly well what's possible when it comes to investing. Some years are excellent, some are poor. And when you're doing your own retirement forecasting, we're happy to use historical averages and tailor the assumptions to your expectations and understanding. But when stress testing, it's crucial to err on the side of caution, so people aren't planning their lives around best case scenarios that might not ever happen. But ultimately, investment risk is about how much volatility you're comfortable with and avoiding sleepless nights. So whilst higher returns are obviously possible, we prefer to use more cautious assumptions to keep things realistic and more grounded. So during our initial free review with Carla, we created a detailed financial forecast, and that will help her understand exactly where she stands in terms of her current finances and whether retiring at 57 would ever be achievable. We carefully input all of the information that Carla shared with us to build an accurate picture of her current situation. Now, when we sat back to present the findings, the results unfortunately were not as optimistic as Carla had hoped. Despite feeling confident that her savings would be enough, the reality was that once we factored in the lifestyle she envisaged for retirement, it became clear there was a shortfall. At Carla's retirement age, she was calculated to have £280,742. in our pots. Carla had worked hard all her life and deserved to enjoy her retirement without compromise, so our focus shifted to exploring how we could turn her goals into a reality. Now, if Carla continued on her current path without making any changes to boost her pension savings, projections showed she'd run out of money by age 66, and by age 90, assuming she lived that long, she'd have a deficit of 283,000 and a little bit. Now, where was that money going to come from? What it actually meant was she could enjoy only 9 years of her dream retirement before facing a significant financial shortfall. Now, clearly something had to give. But here at Reeves, we refused to see our clients beat, so we got to work. We came up with a number of recommendations and presented them to Carla. Now, there's more than one way to skin a cat, as my gran used to say, so we explored several strategies to close any potential retirement gap. We began by reviewing Carla's existing pension pots with the goal of bringing them together into a single platform. That's called consolidation. This can definitely make ongoing management much simpler and may even help reduce overall fees. So if consolidation is in the client's best interest, both financially and practically, and they're comfortable with the change, of course, it's something we always consider. Carla had 4 different pension pots, and whilst that might not seem excessive, the key was to assess their performance individually and check for any hidden fees she may have been unknowingly paying. Now, to begin with, we discussed the benefits of active investment management, and Carla agreed that with only 5 years left until her original retirement age of 57, she definitely wanted her money to work harder in this final stretch. It's a very important stretch. It's also important to highlight here that we could never change someone's investment risk without first discussing it thoroughly with the client. Now, in Carla's case, this was addressed early on during her initial review, where she mentioned being willing to consider adjusting her risk level if it was appropriate. So we then compared Carla's current cautious risk level of 3% with a modest increase to 5%, illustrating the potential long-term impact through side-by-side projections. Now, that extra 2% might not sound particularly big, but over time, compounding can make a huge difference. So when we modelled this change, the results were pretty promising. Her original shortfall of 283,000 improved to 270,000. Now, whilst this wasn't a dramatic improvement and didn't solve all of our problems, and our money would still run out by age 66, we expect that compound growth could help narrow the gap further, and of course we always use conservative numbers. Now, this adjustment wasn't a complete fix, as I've said, but it was definitely an important step that added some flexibility to our plan and complemented the other strategies we continued to explore. After a great start, we still had a lot of work to do. Next, we took another look at Carla's original income goals, starting by understanding the lifestyle she truly wanted in retirement. Now, Carla pictured a comfortable, modest life, enough to enjoy a few holidays each year, visit her family around the UK, and continue her passions, which were agriculture and gardening. And that, of course, brought her a lot of joy and relaxation. Now, the other thing to say here is that she was bringing in, or spending, or earning, whichever way you want to say it, about 30 grand a year. Her original requirement in retirement was actually pretty much the same as, and maybe even a little bit more than what she was earning currently. And that doesn't really make much sense when you're looking to retire. We discussed the possibility of slightly reducing her monthly spending, and she was initially hesitant. After all, she didn't want to feel restricted in retirement. So, as we talked through the potential benefits of trimming her spending a wee bit, she agreed that she would reduce it from 2,750 to 2,500 from 57 to 75, and from £2,000 to 1,750 after age 75. Now, that was still pretty much what she was earning when she was employed, so actually a really good plan, and she could significantly improve her financial security by doing that, and the results did make a decent difference. Her shortfall at age 90 dropped by nearly 75 grand, from just over 283,000 to just over 207,000 pounds. Now, again, this didn't fully close the gap, but it would extend the life of her savings and push back the age at which her funds might run out. Now, for Carla, this was enough reassurance to embrace a slightly more flexible spending plan, knowing it gave her more confidence in a sustainable retirement. So this adjustment wasn't just about numbers, it was about giving Carla some peace of mind and some control and some insight into her future lifestyle. Now, next, we explored a different option. What if Carla were to downsize? Now, she'd already mentioned this during her initial review, and she wanted to see what this might look like on paper, just hypothetically speaking, of course. By downsizing, Carla could unlock £20,500 in equity, which would either be invested or held as a contingency fund. However, with just 5 years to retirement, her outlook only improved slightly. But by keeping this option open, it would allow Carla's money to grow through active investment, and £20,500 might not seem like a lot, but the right active investment strategy can be a real contributing factor to boosting her pension over a lifetime. Now, as I mentioned earlier, she was self-employed. Now, if a company puts £20,000 a year into her pension, that works out to be about £1,700 a month. But Carla doesn't pay this from her own pocket. It's her business making this payment directly into her pension. This means the money comes from the company's profits, not from her personal salary or bank account. In the UK, when a company makes pension contributions like this, it can deduct those payments from its profits before paying income tax. So by diverting £20,000 a year into Carla's pension, her company lowers its taxable profits and usually pays less tax. This is a really smart way from a tax perspective for business owners to save for retirement. It also might save on national insurance contributions, depending if you're a sole trader, partnership or limited company. However, the total contributions to Carla's pension must stay within the government's annual pension allowance to avoid paying extra tax. For 2025-26 tax year, this is £60,000. But if Carla has already taken money out of her pension flexibly or earns a lot, her limit could well be lower. This approach really gives Carla immediate tax savings because of the company's reduced tax bill, and it also helps build her retirement savings over time. So what difference would that make? Well, Carla originally had a shortfall of about £283,000, meaning she risked running out of money earlier than she would plan to. After the pension contributions, this shortfall improved by £60,000. So she's still in the red, but the good news is her money is now expected to last longer. Instead of running out at 66, it should last until she's at least 70. So this strategy is definitely moving things in the right direction. But what was next? Well, she'd expressed an interest in discussing phased retirement. That's basically scaling back to a 3-day week until age 60 with a trusted assistant taking over day-to-day shop responsibilities. This plan offered her the freedom to enjoy more of life outside of work whilst still staying connected to the job and her business, which she loved. Now, a complete stop actually never really felt right for her because she loved what she did. So this approach gave her the best of both worlds. But what did it actually mean for her future? So when we ran the numbers, the impact was pretty striking. Our cash flow analysis revealed a significant improvement. Projected shortfall shrank by another £63,000, bringing her much closer to her retirement goals. Even more impressively, her pension pot at age 60 jumped from £190,711 to £286,770. Now, you might be wondering, why on earth would Carla delay retirement when she really wants to stop working at 57? And of course, that's a great question. And you'd be right to ask it. Now, Carla does want to retire early, but sometimes you've just got to make your money last and work harder for you in retirement. It helps to be open to different possibilities. We always explore all the options, by the way, with all our clients so they can make smart, informed choices. Now, for example, Carla was interested in phased retirement. This means she plans to cut back her work hours to 3 days a week until she was 60, and her assistant's going to handle the daily shop tasks. She definitely wasn't ready to stop working completely because she just loved what she does. She was happy to ease into retirement gradually, I guess you might say. Now, building on that delaying retirement idea, we also talked about another option, delaying retirement altogether from 57 to 63 and just grafting full time until then. Now, it wasn't just a random suggestion. We did look carefully at how this could affect her finances so she could understand the benefits and downsides. Our job was to show her the numbers and help her decide what was right. Now, the results in this instance were pretty clear and impressive. If she waited to retire completely until 63 instead of 57 and just ditched that idea, her shortfall dropped by £145,533. That's a big improvement. So we're doing everything else, but we're not doing phased retirement. Now, our pension pot at 63 jumped by about £91,000 to £309,000 by working longer and saving more. And you'd expect that, wouldn't you? Now, this change, waiting a few more years before retiring at all, although a big change, made a huge difference to Carla's financial future. It shows how being flexible and informed can really reshape a retirement plan for the better. Just to be clear, Carla didn't have to choose this option. It was simply another path we showed her, so she knew all of our options and could decide what was best for her as her life evolved. So folks, this is actually where it all comes together. When we ran the final numbers, the transformation was remarkable, but let's remind ourselves what is now in her plan. So we've consolidated our pensions. We've assumed a 5% investment return, which, remember, is conservative in our view. She's putting 20k a year into her pension from her business, and also she's adapted her income expectations down a little bit, and she's going down to 3 days a week from 57 to 60. I think altogether that's quite a nice compromise. And the result, her projected deficit's completely gone. And in fact, by age 90, she's looking at a surplus of 24 grand, a vital buffer. And remember, she hasn't downsized at this stage either. So especially when you consider future healthcare needs, that's a nice little buffer to have. And our pension pot, it didn't just last, it grew. But folks, here's the real message. If you aren't on track, not all is lost, because sometimes it's not about having more money, it's about having the right plan and understanding how much money you actually need, of course, really important. The right guidance is vital, somebody who can help you shift the puzzle pieces until they actually fit. That's fitting around you, your life, your goals, and of course, your long-term future. Now, Carla didn't settle for the first version of her retirement story, did she? She asked the questions, she explored every path. We helped her with all of that, and with a clear head and the right support behind her, she made great decisions that felt right, not just for now, but for decades ahead. She adjusted her goals, not out of sacrifice, but out of strategy, and she made a choice, and in return, she gained something invaluable, a retirement with freedom, confidence, flexibility, options, and peace of mind. So this is what real planning actually looks like, and I hope her story resonates with you guys and girls, because when Carla first came to us, her question was simple: can I retire at 57 with £261,000? And technically, yes, she could, but based on her income needs and the absence of a solid strategy, her money would not last. It was a strong starting point though, but it didn't have much structure, to be fair. And I want to make this part absolutely clear. For Carla, all was definitely not lost, not even close. That's what we do here at Reeves. We don't give you a yes or a no, we give you a map, we give you options, we evaluate, we explore, we challenge, and we build something together that truly works for you. And yes, we guide, of course, yes, we advise, but the decision, well, ultimately that's yours, just like Carla's. Retirement is not a deadline, folks, it's a design, and when it's done right, it can be one of the most empowering chapters of your life, and so it should be. So right, folks, with that food for thought, you've now seen the art of what's possible for Carla, but the journey doesn't end when you reach retirement, of course. It's just the start of a new chapter. And one of the most important questions becomes, how will you draw your pension? How will you spend your money? Now, an annuity or drawdown, that's the question we're talking about now, and it's a big decision. And like most things in life, there's no one size fits all answer. But the great news is you don't have to figure it out alone. Surprise, surprise. We've got the tools, we've got the knowledge, the experience to help you make the most informed choice for your future. So with that in mind, why don't you give that a click, and I'll see you all there.